Hi there, this is Dr. Simon Middle. I hope you're having a great day. And today we want to talk a little bit about groupthink and how do we manage that? How do we lead even in the context of we want some consensus, but also how does that then potentially limit the amount of innovation that might happen when we're in this consensus-based problem solving? And so we want to be really conscious of that. And so when you think about it, there are many forces that kind of lead to groupthink, a desire for consensus, a desire for a democratic process. And sometimes that just actually limits innovation. And so having cross-functional tasks can be really helpful. Having outside thought processes can also be helpful. And so we want to make sure we have a couple of things in groups that can be really helpful. First of all, as a leader, how open am I to being challenged and also being able to think outside the box? So when we think about being challenged, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, am I going to get defensive? Am I going to sort of dig my heels in, or somehow am I going to be open to a different idea, a different perspective? Even when I have done a lot of thinking and feel pretty sure about myself, how do I then sit in a place where people feel comfortable to give me really different ideas. So we want to be able to be open to that. And so one of the things that can be helpful is thinking about what is the story in my head about a decision or a solution, and have I so bought into it that nothing else is actually valid? And when we think about validity of different people's experiences, different people's ideas and perspectives, we want to think about they have just as valid an idea as I do. That doesn't mean that that's the right solution or does the right idea, but it is still valid. And when we think about validity, the discussion then becomes, tell me what parts of this are valid. What are some of the challenges we might have? And yet we continue to validate what a person's saying and also think about the experience they're having that has allowed them to feel comfortable and frankly vulnerable to share this idea. When we think about that, then we can also avoid groupthink by proposing a placeholder solution. And these are limited ideas, not the final solution, but it could be a transitional solution. When we have a process we're trying to fix, so many people have different perspectives and different thoughts about it that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that there are, again, many perspectives. Maybe we start in one place of the process. An example, we did a Kaizen event looking at refill prescriptions in the clinic I was part of, and we recognized there were lots of different hands, lots of different processes. And so we decided to start with a single step change rather than trying to change the whole thing. Now, eventually we had a map to change everything, typical of a Kaizen event, but we wanted to make sure that we could measure the success based on each step that was changed. And that was really helpful to be able to say that everybody has something valid to bring. As we move forward, then the other part of groupthink is to celebrate those successes, which may not have come from you as a leader, but also have provided a good starting point. And when we can have those good starting points, then we can start to think about everybody's included in that concept of how do we bring these new ideas forward. So we need to think about what actually causes groupthink. And part of it is that there's a sense of belonging, but also there may be a fear of not feeling accepted if I have a different idea or if I have a different perspective. And so we want to create safe spaces that say, hey, every idea has some validity to it, and we want to hear everybody's ideas rather than giving an idea and then assuming everybody's going to respond to that in a positive or negative way. We want to be open to the fact that people have really different perspectives, and it can be really helpful to not think about the solution, but really think about options and what information might be needed to make those decisions as a group. That can be challenging because when we want fast, quick solutions, we tend to speed this process up. And when we speed the process up, we will tend to ask people to conform in this groupthink way. When others have divergent thinking, we have to, one, include people who have divergent thinking. So sometimes we need to look at the people in our team and say, who's going to bring a divergent point of view? And then we want to be able to ask some really good questions and some about our team or about our group. So one of the questions is, are you in a group in which you self-censor because you know that if you offer a different point of view, you'll be ridiculed, shunned, or disregarded? The second question, is there any group in which you always automatically agree with all the opinions and judgments of the group? The third question, is there any group in which you or others pressure a dissenter to change his or her views? And then the last question is there any group in which you and the others in your group regard the opposing or competitive group as evil, stupid, or weak? Now, we may not use those words out loud, but in our minds, we want to be honest with ourselves and really ask ourselves, am I thinking that way? If we are answering yes to this, then we are probably subject to a groupthink process. Now, there are times where groupthink is really helpful when we are trying to get some consensus, but we also want to make sure we're open to innovative ideas. And this is where innovation can die, is if we're not open to this. So I'm encouraging to do a couple of things, and you'll see this in the worksheet. First of all, ask yourself those questions. Am I actually succumbing to groupthink? The second part of that is going to say, how can I structure my teams so that there's safety for dissenting and maybe controversial points of view without that person feeling like they're on the outside rather than as a part of the team? And one of the ways you can start thinking about doing that is, what are your rule sets? What is your charter, your team charter say about allowing people to have open ideas and that we're not bringing negativity into that? And so that we're responding out of empathy, out of kindness, out of non-judgment, and really without a pressure to try and conform. And then the last part is, as a leader, what are some of the things that you can watch for in your teams to make sure that you are allowing the entire group to be open to different ideas, different perspectives, outside of the box thinking, and not dismissing it or not being dismissed by other team members? So those are some things that can really be helpful. I'll have you work through the worksheet, and we'll look forward to discussing that at your next session. Thanks.